Call meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance, Councilmember Lawson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm going to deviate from the agenda just a little bit. We're going to have a moment of silence for Kristen Turnbow and Clayton Turnbow and his family and their family in the Parks and Public Works Departments. Thank you. Let's keep them in your prayers, please. All right, announcement of Ward 1 council member vacancy. Hold on, I'm not prepared. I received this letter from council member Dave Clark. Mayor Larkey and City Council, it is with great regret that I will be announcing my resignation tonight at our council meeting. It has been my pleasure to serve alongside of you and our wonderful city staff. I look forward to watching you take our city to better places. I implore you to look for a replacement for me that symbolizes what Ward 1 voters would want. Too many times, City Council looks at what they want and the citizens vote them out after their appointment. Respectively, David A. Clark, Ward 1 City Council. It's up to you.
What?
You want to say anything?
I don't know. I've never been quiet before, have I?
Councilors now?
Yeah. Well, it's about making sure I can get through this, so. I always tell people it's always been a pleasure to serve the citizens of Belton. You knew this day was coming. I knew this day was coming for a long time. I just, now that it's here, it's kind of like retiring. You're not ready for it. But I tell people all the time, I just thank what I said in my letter, staff, you guys, City Council, former City Council members that I served with over the years, all the staff members from the directors that we get to deal with on a day-to-day basis to each and every employee. I thank them for their service, dedication for our city. Need to thank my family for allowing me to do this. It does take you away from your family, as you guys know. So, my wife, kids, but I need to thank the citizens of Ward 1 and all citizens of Belton for supporting me for the last 4.5 years. It's been my pleasure to serve. I tell people all the time, it's like, to me, it's one of the greatest honors to serve on City Council. If you want to do the school board, I tell people everybody should serve at least on one board. I don't care if it's the park, planning and zoning, some board, so you understand how the city operates. People think I think sometimes actually, I think people don't think we actually live here because we vote to raise taxes. I mean, it raises my taxes too. But just like the rest of us, I mean, we all want our community to be the greatest place to live and raise our families. And the only way to do that sometimes is with money. So I would just tell the citizens out there, let's keep making Belton better. But thank you. Forgot to mention my quick trip.
Yeah, exactly. All right, in appreciation of David A. Clark for outstanding and dedicated service as council member and mayor pro tem for the city of Belton, Missouri from April 2000, April 2002, and April 2019 to September 2023. Thank you for your loyalty and commitment to the city and to the citizens of Belton. Mayor Norman K. Larkey Sr. and the City Council.
I guess I don't come open.
I don't guess not.
Secret.
Oh, she's got the lid over here. Andrea's got your lid.
That wasn't the lid, huh? I don't need to thank you. I'll see you Saturday.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember Powell,
Here.
Councilmember Pryan,
Here.
Councilmember Kraft,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Personal appearances, none. Unfinished business. A, motion approving the final reading of Bill 2023-50 as amended.
An ordinance approving an amended preliminary development plan for Autumn Woods, generally located at the northwest corner of West Markey Road and Belton Avenue.
Present. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
What, Matt, did they do anything to make sure the buffer between the housing, excuse me, wrong one.
Anybody else? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Lawson,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
Richardson,
Aye.
Pryan,
Aye.
Kraft,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey.
Yes. Motion carries. B, motion approving the final reading of Bill 2023-21.
An ordinance approving an amended development and maintenance agreement between the City of Belton and Autumn Woods Development LP for public and private infrastructure and site improvements in Autumn Woods.
Present. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Pryan,
Aye.
Kraft,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
White,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Richardson.
Aye.
Motion carries. New business. A, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-54.
An ordinance amending Article 5 in Chapter 10 and Appendix A of the Unified Development Code to implement a rental registration and inspection program.
Present. Second.
I have a motion and a second. You're up.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before this evening are UDC text amendments that will assist with the implementation of the rental inspection program. These amendments are to Chapter 10, Article 5 of the UDC, and include shifting the rental licensing program from Chapter 6 of the Code of Ordinances to the UDC to be combined with the inspection program. This amendment includes retitling it from a rental licensing to a rental registration that will distinguish it from business licensing. Both the registration and inspection program will be administered by the Community Development Department rather than Community Development administering inspections, while the City Clerk's office handles the licensing or registration process. That change will help streamline the registration and inspection process for the program. These amendments include adding definitions that were referenced in Chapter 6 that were not previously included in the rental inspection program. That includes a definition for family member, updating the definition of landlord to also include owner, adding a definition for a local point of contact, and clarifying the definition of property manager. Exempted land uses have also been added, which may include uses that may be places that have short or long-term residents, but are not classified as rental units under this code. The registration requirements are being added, which follow the same process from Chapter 6, but includes updated language and requires a local point of contact to be provided when neither the landlord, owner, or the property manager are within 30 miles of the rental unit. The schedule of fees and charges in Appendix A of the UDC is also being amended to add a rental registration fee of $20 per unit. That fee will cover both the registration processing as well as required inspections for each unit. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on September 5th, at which no one spoke in favor or in opposition to the amendments. The commission recommended unanimous approval of the amendments, and staff also recommends approval, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead, Brett.
No,
Oh, go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Rob.
Rob, I'm still thinking mine.
First of all, just to be clear, there will not be a requirement for a business license for landlords now, right?
Correct.
property owners.
It will,
It'll be the registration for $20.
for residential landlords, no, it will just be a registration of the unit itself. There still are certain property managers will still be required a business license, as well as manufactured home parks.
Okay.
But for actual landlords, they're not registering themselves, they're registering their units.
Also on page 15, see, I guess it's, 10143C, says inspections will be conducted by the enforcement official upon notification of change of occupancy by the landlord/owner, property manager, or occupant. But that's the only place I see that the city hears that or becomes aware that there's a change in occupancy. And it doesn't really require them, it just makes it sound like, oh, by the way, if they tell us, we'll do it. Is there someplace else that I'm missing?
If it would fall under our code enforcement process, that if they don't notify us and we find out, then that would be a violation. So we would reach out to them and let them know that we need to have that inspection, or they would be in violation of the code.
Okay, so that's someplace else other than in what we're voting on right now, right?
Correct. That's already built into the program itself.
Okay. So let's say that when they sign the form, and I don't know that a new form is available yet, but if they sign the form, I guess they're going to agree that they will notify you or the department about a change. If they don't do that, if they just say, oh, I forgot, or let's say that the tenant gets in there so fast they turn on the water before, at the same time they move in. Anyway, if there's somebody in there and we still haven't done an inspection, do we go in and do an inspection then, or do we just fine them, or?
We would still require an inspection be done, even at that point if it's occupied. It's
Okay.
occupied because they didn't follow the process. But that is all, those are all items that we are going to address through communications over the next couple of months with registered landlords, as well as finding those properties that currently aren't registered and notifying them of these requirements as well.
Perfect, thanks a lot.
Dave's not here to remind me to speak into the mic.
I will. Speaking of the mic.
So, in 10-142B, it addresses the representative. But does it require that there is someone that has legal authority to sign documents?
It does not. It just requires that they are a person that it can be responsible for the city or the tenant should an emergency or code enforcement violation occur.
So the ownerships can still be hidden.
Yes, and the city of Belton does not have the authority to do more than what the Missouri Secretary of State has authority to do regarding ownership of LLCs, limited partnerships, and general partnerships. For note, for you and the public, an LLC, LP, or general partnership are not required to file any documentation with the Secretary of State to operate a business in the state of Missouri that states exactly who are the members or who are the general partners or limited partners.
I gotta keep my mouth quiet.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Never have before. Anybody else? Anybody else? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. B, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-55.
An ordinance amending Chapter 6 and Appendix A of the Code of Ordinances to implement a rental registration and inspection program.
Present. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any information, any questions?
I don't have any additional information to add than Matt did, but this is the complementary ordinance to his UDC amendment.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. C, a motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-56.
An ordinance approving the appropriation and revision of the City of Belton fiscal year 2024 adopted city budget.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, information?
Just a little bit of information. This is for a local records grant that Andrea is going to be receiving in the amount of $27,400. We didn't know about it when the budget was approved, so we're adding the revenue and the expense, both at $27,400 to the budget.
Any questions? Go ahead.
I do have something to add. If there aren't questions or additional information needed, we are asking for a double read because the contract is coming up later in the agenda.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second.
Second.
Motion and a second for a second reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2023-56.
An ordinance approving the appropriation and revision of the City of Belton fiscal year 2024 adopted city budget.
Present.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Aye.
Pryan,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Howell,
Yes.
Kraft.
Aye.
Motion carries. D, a motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-57.
An ordinance approving the formalization of the MOU Memorandum of Understanding between the Drug Enforcement Administration and the City of Belton.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. You have anything? Anybody else? Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. E, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-58.
An ordinance approving a special use permit to add an electronic message center to an existing pole sign for Aaron's Family Fun Center at the northwest corner of East 171st Street and Aaron Lane in the City of Belton, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead.
Yep, before this evening is a special use permit request for modifications to an existing legal non-conforming pole sign for Aaron's Family Fun Center. This pole sign is located at the northwest corner of 58 Highway and Aaron Lane and was installed in 2004. There is an existing 3 by 10 foot changeable copy sign that is proposed to be modified to an electronic message center sign. Per the UDC, existing legal non-conforming signs may be improved and keep their non-conforming status when legal non-conforming items such as setbacks, height, and size are brought 50% closer to compliance with the code. Since the only modification of the sign does not expand any of those items, including the height, area, or location, the applicant is requesting a waiver from that requirement. As part of the modification, a pole wrap will be added to create a wider base similar to a monument sign. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on September 5th at which no one spoke in favor or in opposition to the request. The Commission recommended unanimous approval of the special use permit, and staff also recommends approval with 3 conditions. And if there are no questions or concerns this evening, staff does request a second reading to allow the applicant to proceed with the sign permit.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2023-58.
An ordinance approving a special use permit to add an electronic message center to an existing pole sign for Aaron's Family Fun Center at the northwest corner of East 171st Street and Aaron Lane in the City of Belton, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Pryan,
Aye.
Kraft,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
White,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Mayor Larky.
Yes. Motion carries.
See you in a little bit.
E, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-59.
An ordinance approving a special use permit for an outdoor recreation park to be known as Powell Park at the northeast corner of Main Street and Herschel Street, 611 Main Street, in the city of Belton, Missouri.
Present. Second.
We have a motion and a second. You're still up.
Yep. Before this evening is a special use permit request for Powell Park, which is a proposed outdoor recreation park in a C1 OTB, which is a neighborhood commercial Old Town Belton overlay zoning district. The proposed pocket park is located at the northeast corner of Main Street and Herschel Street and covers approximately 0.56 acres. The proposed park includes a central gazebo and passive outdoor spaces with paths, landscaping, and a labyrinth. The park plan does meet all of the requirements of the UDC with the exception of a reduced monument sign from a 10-foot setback to 3.5-foot setback along Main Street. A separate sidewalk easement is required to be recorded since part of the public sidewalk will encroach onto private property. And this park is proposed to be privately owned and maintained, but open to the public. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on September 5th, at which a nearby resident spoke in favor of the request. No one spoke in opposition to the request. And the Commission recommended unanimous approval of the special use permit, and staff also recommends approval with 5 conditions. The Commission also approved a final development for the park plan. Again, if there are no questions or concerns, staff does recommend a second reading tonight to allow the applicant to proceed with the development of the park.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Will there be electricity in the gazebo?
That, I will double check the plan real quick. There
I
is
meant plug-ins.
electricity on the site for lighting.
Yes, there will be 2 outlets.
So there will be 2 outlets at the gazebo.
Okay.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second.
Second.
It was motion for a second. Motion for a second reading. Sorry, I was lost there for a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2023-59.
An ordinance approving a special use permit for an outdoor recreation park to be known as Powell Park at the now northeast corner of Main Street and Herschel Street in the city of Belton, Missouri.
Present. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Lawson,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
Powell, Richardson,
Aye.
Pryan,
Aye.
Kraft,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Mayor Larky.
Motion carries. I'm waiting for you to say Clark.
I took his out. I forgot to take that. Did you vote yes or no, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
You didn't say it out loud.
Oh, sorry, sometimes I get
He answers in his head.
answer in my head, you're right.
Almost required 3 outlets.
Thank you.
You're welcome. G, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-60.
An ordinance amending Appendix B Traffic Schedules, Table 4, Speed Zones, as referenced in Chapter 19, Streets, Sidewalks, Rights-of-Way, and Other Public Places in the Code of Ordinances of the City of Belton, Missouri to establish certain speed zones.
Present. Second.
We have a motion and a second. You're up.
So this evening, I'm presenting what we talked about at the last meeting is a change in the speed limit on Cambridge between Cedar and Prospect. We were approached, the gentleman actually came here and made note that he thought the people were speeding on that street. So we thought we'd investigate to see what the speeds are along Cambridge and to see if there's something we need to do and what changes we need to make on the road. We conducted a speed study, and from the speed study, we collected over 6 days over 10,000 cars. Those are like 10,606 cars. And from that, we found the prevailing 85th percentile speed was 35 miles per hour. Now, as we've discussed in the past, the safest speed to travel through much research into traffic engineering is the 85th percentile. So that is the percentile that speed limits are set. when you actually study accident rate and safety, it's actually people who travel at the 85th percentile are much safer than the people who travel at the 80th or 75th percentile. There's a higher level of accidents at a lower speed, mainly because due to the differential in speed. So if someone's going slower, you've all experienced it as you're driving, someone's going slower, it catches you off guard and you catch up to them very quickly. And so it's always been established that the 85th percentile is the speed that we set it. And this comes from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. It is the authority that we use for this work. So as we discovered this, we felt it was prudent to bring it to you to consider this change. And I know there's people on both sides of the discussion that some want it, some don't want it. But for us, it's just up to us to present the facts to you, make a recommendation what it should be through the traffic engineer's eyes, through facts, and then have you guys make the decision. And so, happy to answer any questions that you have.
Go ahead, Brett.
So, if it was already 35, what would the 85th percentile become?
It should remain about the same.
So but it would go up because you're talking about it right now. It's 25, and you're saying the 85th percentile of 25 miles per hour is 35.
So
The 85th percentile of 35 would be 45, 40. So they increase the speed of traffic for everybody.
That's not quite how it works. And so people drive based on perception of safety. And so as they perceive the road is how they drive it. So if you, let me put it in a different perspective. Let's forget a city street and you look at an interstate, for instance. If you label an interstate at 30 miles per hour in a rural area, there's not many people who are going to perceive that as, I need to drive 30 miles an hour on a road that I know I can drive 70 miles an hour on. And so they perceive what the safest level is, they drive at that level, and that's what creates the 85th. It's not 85th percentile of the speed limit, it's of the people traveling. And so normally, if you set something at 5 miles an hour, nobody's going to drive at 5 miles an hour. You'll find out what people perceive as the safest speed for that street.
So in layman's terms, people are speeding right now.
Yes.
Correct.
Go ahead.
I can appreciate that you're following best practices and bringing this to us, and that Cambridge is somewhat of a main thoroughfare and may continue to see increased traffic, but I don't think the timing is right to make this adjustment. I understand why you want to do it. I just don't think the timing is right, both what spurred the investigation into this, a resident coming in with concerns, and now that I have experienced school drop-off and pickup on Cambridge, I'm going to be a no vote on this. But I understand why you're bringing it to us. I don't think this is the right time.
And just so everybody knows, we would not change the school speeds. There's a 20 miles an hour speed limit during school times.
Yeah, I think the same logic applies about perceived safety.
Go ahead.
I'm going to agree with Allison. This is definitely not the right time. I've had citizens come to me and tell me that they're hearing when they're asking for these speed studies, oh, well, it might go up instead of down like you want it. And I feel like that's punishment to our citizens for trying to solve a problem. And I don't want to do that. I don't want someone coming in and being like, hey, I have a problem. Can you help me? And us to tell them, no, we're not only not going to help you, but we're also going to make it worse. So, and that's just how I feel about it. I mean, my perceived safety is what the speed limit is set at, and I still do 5 to 10 over that. Don't follow me though, please, Chief. That's my perceived safety. I think they know what they're talking about, and I can push it a little bit more. So then if we set it at 35, are people going to be pushing it and going 45 and making it worse? So I agree with Allison. I will also be a no.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I've talked to a few citizens too, and I haven't had one person that's for it. So.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I looked a little bit at this Institute of Transportation Engineers. I only read it once, or the appropriate places, but it also said something that comes into concern is pedestrian traffic and crash data. I haven't heard of crashes on there, but is that something that you also look at in addition to the 85th percentile?
Correct. You can look at those items and consider them. The manual that you looked at for ITE does not actually give a reduction in speed based upon
Right, you're right.
those criteria. It's just something to consider.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But basically, we don't have any data on that.
Not that there's a problem in that area, no.
Right, okay.
And just one more comment is that, Public Works isn't interested in like trying to do something negative or bad. We're just presenting the facts of the situation, so I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
Anybody else? Irregardless of how this vote turns out, I know we've talked in the past about putting up I don't know what you call it,
The radar
sign.
signs.
Can we do that even on the outcome of this vote? Or what do we need to do that? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's something we can do.
From us, or can you guys just do that? Go
Ye-
ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is something that we are putting in the works, is to put something up there, because that does have a traffic calming measure to it whenever we put those radar signs up. The majority of people do respond to those, so.
I think that would be a good road to go down in the future for other roads as well. Anybody else? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
You're in favor? Against?
No.
Against?
No.
Oh,
Motion failed. Motion approving resolution 2023-91.
A resolution approving a contract for laserfish licensing, support, and professional services from ICC Community Development Solutions, R&D Computer Systems, LLC.
Present.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, back in June, the City Council accepted the Missouri Secretary of State reimbursement grant for Enterprise Content Management System. The state of Missouri required this purchase to either go out for bid or for us to use a already existing cooperative bid. We were able to identify a cooperative bid through a local vendor. He's over in Kansas. And this management system will allow many departments to use the electronic record keeping. It will help to eliminate the large amount of retained paper documents that we have and will allow us to keep files more efficiently. The cost for the first year of licensing and support and service is $12,638.87. That includes a one-time setup and one-time training costs, and all of that cost will be 100% reimbursed by the Missouri Secretary of State grant. The agreement will be renewed annually, and the cost will be reflected in department budgets going forward. In addition to staff utilizing the system, we were also able to secure council members with a username and password, so you'll be able to access the system and see the documents that are in there. And there will also be a portal on our website, so citizens can also access documents from the laserfish system. And it's all included.
And this is tied back to 2023-56, correct?
Yes, it is.
Any questions?
she had me at free.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
You need a second on this,
You need-
too?
No, it's a resolution.
Oh.
I'd still give it to her.
Oh, we can do a second if you want to, if you want to read it again. Aye, motion approving resolution 2023-92.
A resolution creating a public safety advisory committee for the city of Belton.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. You're up.
I'm going to try to get through this without coughing too much. Yes, Mr. Mayor and council members, we're bringing to you this resolution to create the Public Safety Advisory Committee, which would include police, fire, and emergency management services for the city of Belton. This is essentially, to us, it's another way that we can reach out and be transparent with the community, allow for public input into how we are practicing all our policies and what policies we have in place, and just a place for general feedback on perceptions of our public safety personnel and actions within the community. And so we're just asking for your support of this resolution, and then we'll come forth with, we're going to double down on our efforts to recruit folks to show interest in this committee, and then we would bring those folks to you hopefully at the next meeting.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. J, motion approving resolution R 2023-93.
A resolution approving the formalization of the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between the Help Humane Society and the City of Belton.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Chief, anything?
We had been into a test and evaluation in regards to our relationship with Help Humane, and we encountered some issues and worked those out over a course of time and came up with an agreement. We actually went to some other cities and captured some language, and I believe that we will be working together. We've actually kind of continued with the TNR program. Up to this date, we've probably done 20 cats this year, just continuing to evaluate that process along with Wayside Waifs. And Wayside Waifs has actually been a part of this, building this MOU and understanding the procedures and everything. And so we're really happy about where we are with this.
Any questions? Hearing none, all, what? Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's on the topic, it's not specifically this, kittens. Are all TNR cats, kittens, everything, they are released back to where they were? We're not keeping any, trying to adopt them out, anything like that, is that correct?
That was one of the issues that we encountered, and we've worked past that, and we have an understanding that that will not happen.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda. One motion non-available to approve the recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for an item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Communication from City Council. Councilman Richardson.
I don't have anything.
Yeah, some parks updates. Upcoming event would be the Pumpkin Palooza. It is October 28th, and they're moving that back to Wallace Park from Memorial Park. The space is just a little more open and allows for more parking. Some interesting numbers from the last parks meeting is that youth recreational signups year over year are up over 100 signups, which is really encouraging. Those numbers took a dip during COVID, so to see, kids getting back involved and the numbers growing up for all the sports is really encouraging, and it's also a reflection of the hard work of the recreation staff. Rock the Lake out at the disc golf tournament out at Cleveland Lake raised $12,000 for Belton Parks and Rec, so that had an awesome result. And they also took out their new food truck called the Grandstand, and it sold out, so that was successful as well. Aligned with the city's comprehensive plan, Confluence is also going to develop a comprehensive plan for parks. So parks is a small piece of the city's comprehensive plan, but they'll get some more tactical, concrete ideas from theirs. And the Dryden land plans are developing, and that's really exciting. That land, as well as Powell Park, is such a gift to the city, so that's been kind of a banner year for that. And I would just lastly say, if we could all continue to hold Kirsten and Clayton, as well as their work families, close, that'd be a nice thing to do.
I would like to thank Councilman Clark for his time in Ward 1. Him and I have gone back around 2000 of being partners here and there in different political aspects of the city, and it was always nice to have Dave around. If I ever had a problem, I always told him to call Dave Clark. So,
You can probably still do that.
Right.
I appreciate Dave's time.
I'd also like to reiterate thanks to Councilman Clark and let him know the blank spot is for when he gets tired of that big house and he moves into the apartments, then he can rent again, so.
Okay, two things. The Belton Cass County TDD met last week. This is their major project is to expand Mullen Road. Anyway, apparently it'll be another 6 weeks for Verizon to get their act together and get their equipment out of the way, out of the right of way, and for the project bidding to begin. So we're still, I think last time I said we were 6 weeks out. Well, now we're still 6 weeks out. I guess I could just tape record this. The second thing is, next Friday, a week from this Friday, there's going to be a blood drive next door at the Old City Hall from 1 to 5, the American Red Cross. They always give a song and dance about how short they are on blood, but this year they're really short. I guess they're sending stuff maybe to Ukraine, I don't know, but they're people aren't donating like they used to. So if you got an extra pint to give, you can go to redcrossblood.org, type in our zip code 64012, and page down till you get to the October 6th, and there we are. That's it.
I don't have anything.
Okay, so it's up to me. I would, I've done this already, but I'd publicly like to thank Councilmember Clark and Mayor Pro Tem for his efforts in assisting me in the last 2.5 years of me being sitting up here. He's a wealth of knowledge, both of what's going on in this council and the city. So I'd just personally like to thank him for what he did for me. So with that being said, he's gone now, and we have to replace him, but we're going to do that in 2 weeks. But we got to replace the Mayor Pro Tem, and we're going to try to do that tonight. So, according to charter, City Council shall elect annually from its members a Mayor Pro Tem. The Mayor Pro Tem shall assume the powers or duties of the Mayor during the absence or disability of the Mayor, or if vacancy occurs. While assuming the powers and duties of the Mayor Pro Tem shall retain his or her vote as a City Council member, but shall not possess an additional mayoral vote power provided by Charter Section 4.3 and shall not possess a mayoral or veto power provided by Charter Section 4.4. So that's where we're at. So it's up to you guys to select a new Mayor Pro Tem. What?
Did we motion it?
Yeah, that's how we do it. Apparently it's been done different in the past and not according to their charter and the code. So that's why we're doing it this way. So a motion would be in order.
Okay. Motion to elect Allison Lawson as pro tem.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Allison Lawson as Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Voice vote's fine. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. You gotta come over and sit right here. That's all on that. That's all I have. City Manager?
I don't have much to say. I'm trying to save my voice, but I did want to, just give condolences to the Turnbow family, let them know that the city of Belton is standing beside them during this really difficult time. On a different note, I would want to formally recognize, we sent out a press release, but the appointment of our Assistant City Manager for Economic Development and Community Services, Mike Geeky. He's become a permanent member of this staff, and he's already having a very huge impact, and we're glad to have him. So that's it.
All right, items for review and discussion. Item A, door-to-door solicitors.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Throughout the year, the City Clerk's Office receives numerous license applications for door-to-door peddlers selling various things as pest control, education materials, security systems, and solar panels. To date this license year, staff has issued 20 door-to-door licenses. The Belton Door-to-Door Peddler Code was adopted in 1967. The code requires the parent company to have an annual $70 business license fee, or business license, sorry, and allows for the issuance of an annual door-to-door individual peddler license for $15 each. We're all aware of growing concerns of citizen safety and security, and earlier this year, the police department made available complimentary no solicitation stickers to citizens. It was received with fantastic results, and we've already placed the second order. Unfortunately, it hasn't deterred uninvited door-to-door peddlers as much as it should have. A staff recently reached out to 11 neighboring cities to compare their policy and procedures to our policy and procedure on door-to-door peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers. All cities made a distinct difference between the definition of peddler, solicitor, and canvasser. A peddler and solicitor are for commercial or for sales purposes. A canvasser is a non-commercial purpose. That can include political campaigning, census taking, or religious organizations. Generally, canvassers were exempt from the licensing and registration with the city. 10 of the 11 cities required peddlers and solicitors to have a city business license or something equivalent to Belton's city business license. The cost for the license ranged from $50 to $100, and the valid period ranged from 30 days to 12 months. 10 of the 11 cities required peddlers and solicitors to have a city-issued ID badge for individual employees going door to door. The cost for the ID badge ranged from $5 to $100, and the valid period ranged from 1 day to 12 months. There was one city that was distinctly different, and that's North Kansas City. North Kansas City considers peddlers an uninvited solicitation, and their code prohibits uninvited solicitations. This didn't apply to nonprofits like the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts, and it didn't apply to canvassers. So after hearing about what's going on in the neighboring cities with door-to-door peddlers, solicitors, canvassers, staff is asking council for direction on updating Belton's code section. And I do have props. And if anybody would like a sticker, the no solicitation sticker, we do have them at City Hall, here at the annex, at the police station, and there's some here tonight.
Go ahead.
Well, then that means under the current code, everyone who went around and asked for a petition to audit the city, a few of the members are on right up here. We broke the law?
No.
That would be defined as a canvasser.
Yeah. But does our law provide define a canvasser, or were these other laws that define canvasser?
Our code of ordinances does not currently define canvasser.
So when
I would make that recommendation that we very clearly state that.
So in those cases, when you're a canvasser and the person answers the door and says, "Don't you see that sign, no solicitation?" and I say, "I'm not selling anything," they can still shoot at me, which one guy wanted to do. So I think I'm seconding your need, or the need to more define this and split it up between the two types of people coming to your door.
I would also note that under the current ordinance, peddler, the definitions for peddler and solicitor are not so broad as to encompass canvassers.
Okay. Good.
Go ahead.
The North Kansas City model, is that a viable option for us?
I did speak with Patrick prior to presenting this, and is possible.
It is possible. Again, that is an outlier in the field. There is one reported case involving prohibition of peddlers and solicitors. It is from 1892, and it applies to what was then called the town of Trenton, which is the city of Trenton now, and is of a different classification. So it's pretty inapplicable to our current situation. So we would kind of be treading some new ground as a charter city attempting to prohibit peddling or soliciting.
Okay, I thought that might be the answer. So part two, if we went to a one-day permit and they had to come to City Hall every day and pay every day for a one-day permit, would that be a legal deterrent?
So again, that 1892 case dealt with a $4 license fee be acting as an indirect prohibition. But again, we're kind of in unknown territory. Again, that was a case from 1892. There have been significantly more cases interpreting the authority of cities to regulate something. So, for example, there's it's one of my favorite cases. There's the Missouri billboard law that states that cities have the authority to regulate billboards. And there was a case out of Platte City where Platte City prohibited them. The billboard companies came in and said, no, you can't prohibit us, you can only regulate us. Platte City's response, and the judges put this in their order and final decision is, well, if they can regulate you down to the size of a postcard 400 feet away from the interstate, they can surely prohibit you. So there is, again, this would be new territory treaded by a Missouri city as of right now.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So,
Microphone.
I'm at the mic.
Just trying to reminisce.
I'll do that later. Over the weekend, I had several individuals stop by and want to know if they could survey my roof because of all the hail damage. I guess it was Monday, it wasn't the weekend. So they didn't have any documentation, no nothing. So what do citizens do when they have people walking in the right now?
We do encourage people to call the police non-emergency line, but do call them as it's happening. Many times people will wait an hour, 4 hours. I had somebody wait 2 days. It doesn't do much good if you're calling the day after because the police can't respond. So definitely call right away. Do inform the solicitor. That's not something that's allowed here if you don't have a city badge. They do have an ID and they're supposed to be able to show it to you. We do currently have some people licensed, so I don't know we have any roofers licensed, but it's possible they could have been. Always call the non-emergency line. The police will make contact with them. I've had many calls from officers from the road. Does so-and-so have a business license? And we can look them up.
What happens at that point then if, like, do we just ask them to leave then, ask them to go up to City Hall? Do they get a ticket? How does that work?
The officer will tell them that it is required in the city to have a business license and a permit to please go to City Hall. We do have some who come by, we have some who leave, but regardless, they need to leave doing what they're doing at that time. If the officer has to make a second attempt, then it's pretty clear, take care of it, or you need to go. And one of the items we do have in our code now when considering business license applications, including the peddler license application, is your history, your license history. And if you're repeatedly not following the rules, you could not receive a license.
I found it very effective to call the non-emergency line while they're standing there. They tend to make tracks really quick. But I do ask for their peddler license, and they either tell me they don't need one or it's in their car or something like that. And I found that sign very effective since I've put it up. Nobody's come by.
The only ones who would not need one is your Boy Scouts,
Right.
churches, religious groups, schools with going door to door, the defined canvassers.
And Mr. Powell.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that that the police the way they're handling this essentially is they're giving people a first warning, first chance to fix it, and so if they have to stop someone a second time, they're going to get a citation.
Would this require peddlers on the street corner to have a business license?
No, those are handled differently. These are door-to-door individuals, not ones who stay stationary. And that's something that Patrick can speak more on if there's something else to add.
Under your current code, that would potentially be considered an itinerant merchant, which I kind of thought all these things were basically the same up until about a month ago, and then had to read all the codes and various sections about them. So an itinerant merchant does have some licensing requirements. I do not believe that during the past 5 years we've ever had anybody apply for, receive, or otherwise contact the city about an itinerant merchant registration or licensing. So
Our business licenses are good for a year. Are the ID badges also good for a year?
They are currently.
I don't know, I'm thinking out loud, I don't know if there's any value in including a page on the city website of, hey, these are the companies for the next year, they're good to do this, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because sometimes someone will come up and you're not sure, and maybe they've got a story, but if it's on the city website, that would be a resource I would probably rely on, just a thought.
Yes, thank you.
Maybe we could blast it out on, get a copy of the badge and.
It would not be difficult for us to just create a spreadsheet and that we could update online every time someone new comes in and just says essentially, here are the companies that have registered, and even include the number of people they may have under their licensing.
We would.
Go ahead.
I had a person come from a pest control company, and I answered it through my ring on the front door. And once I asked him for his license, he just took off. And so I did call the police non-emergency hotline. They did show up, and he was parked out in front of my house, parked the wrong direction on Main Street, which is a normal occurrence. And I believe they issued him a ticket. But he wasn't there. But 20 minutes later, they had found him somewhere and brought him back to his car and told him he had to leave. Even after that happened, I know days after that, people were still getting the same pest control company to come into their front doors. My concern is I don't want them to take advantage of people and not ever show back up. That's my biggest concern, because that happens every day. So,
yeah. I don't want to make it more difficult, but I would think that if we're going to change our code to differentiate between a solicitor or a salesperson and a canvasser, I would think that most people that get one of these stickers would think it applies to everybody. And so they could point to that and turn away the Boy Scouts, petitioners, churches, everything else, thinking that, and in fact, call the police.
Go ahead.
You lost me for a moment, so could you rediscuss what you were saying when he was talking about the people on the street corner?
So yes, your current code, a peddler, which is kind of the term that you all use, also a huckster or a hawker under the definition, applies to people that go door to door. So if you're not going door to door, you're not a peddler. Instead, you have a transient or itinerant merchant provision in your licensing code that requires, I actually even have it up because I want to make sure I had the definition right. But it is a person or company who engages in a temporary business of selling and delivering goods, wares, and merchandise within the city, and who in furtherance of such purpose, and this is what separates them from a peddler, hires, leases, uses, or occupies any building, structure, motor vehicle, tent, railroad, boxcar, or boat, public room in hotels, lodging houses, apartments, shops, or any street, alley, or other place within the city for the exhibition and sale of such goods, wares, and merchandises. So a peddler or solicitor or hawker or huckster or whatever under your code walks around, knocks on doors. An itinerant merchant sets up somewhere and is there and displays their goods and merchandise, and then you go there, and it is temporary in nature.
So someone standing at the street corner begging for money does not fall.
Would not be either of those, no.
Go ahead.
I'm also for if we can make the North Kansas City, no soliciting, I'm for that. I'm in favor of that if we can do it, but.
Go ahead.
I want to hop back on to what Rob was saying and ask if there's any chance that we can redo those stickers and add specifically, with exceptions of canvassing and what was the other? What did
Just
the other term?
canvassing.
There was a canvassing and nonprofits. There we go. Nonprofits and canvassing. So that way, hopefully citizens at least know when they put that up. That doesn't mean that. And then maybe some education online, like through Facebook and stuff. Get that information out there. I know I try to do that on our Better Belton page a lot. And I am probably more in favor of the day license, even though that possibly puts us at risk, than the North Kansas City. North Kansas City's just sounds a little too happy to me.
If we were to amend our code, we would have to change the sticker anyway because the code refers to a specific section and section numbers. I think we can certainly be in favor of amending the sticker to be appropriate to any amended code. I do hear some interest in North Kansas City. The one day we could do that as well. My recommendation would be to make it very clear in our code, which is not now, that peddlers and solicitors are of a like nature and canvassers are different. Okay?
I agree with that, and
I think education's the key.
let's change the sticker too to match that thought.
It would come at the same time.
Go ahead.
Yeah, throw the definitions of solicitor, peddler, canvasser, and examples would be, I think that would be really clear communication, and that we should stay away from the North Kansas City model because we don't necessarily want to be trailblazers in this area.
Don't forget Huckster.
I would love to update it, though, from 1967.
Yeah. That's older than James. Anybody else? If you have any thoughts, get them to the city manager or Andrea, and we'll move forward with this.
Okay, thank you.
B, drainage area maintenance.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a general maintenance policy for drainage areas that we've come up with. As you all are aware, we've had a lot of concerns, particularly with the West Belton Drainage Way over the last year and the maintenance of that. We did have a lengthy discussion with the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee back in the spring about that, and they had some recommendations they had some concerns about the safety of that. They would rather have safety over aesthetics in that situation. So we took a look at our current code and then what other cities are doing in similar situations. And so that's what's going to be presented this evening. This would just be an internal policy in how we're interpreting the code in these specific areas. It wouldn't necessarily require a code amendment. So currently what's in the current code that we have utilized in the past when we have cited situations like the West Belton Drainage Way, it comes from Chapter 14 of the Code of Ordinances, which is our nuisance code, specifically Article 2, which is regarding weeds and vegetation. And it specifically talks about the purpose of why we have the code that we have that limits the growth of weeds and grass and uncultivated vegetation to 7 inches. And a lot of that is due to the public health, safety, and welfare for the properties. And that includes specifically items as it relates to vegetation, would include various hazards and items that could aggravate allergies and also be a breeding ground for other types of issues. And then there is an exception to that 7-inch and that can go up to 12 inches on undeveloped properties. But 12 inches a foot is the maximum height for any vegetation unless it's specifically for cultivated properties, which is used for agricultural purposes. So the challenges that we have experienced with trying to enforce that particular part of the code on some of these drainage ways and detention areas is that drainage ways and detention areas function differently than developed properties. Drainage ways are naturally low-lying areas that carry stormwater and typically have banks that have steeper slopes than the surrounding properties that are located on higher ground. Drainage ways may also be natural with vegetation on the basin or man-made, which would be concrete or some other masonry material, which is the situation with the West Belton Drainage Way. And then drainage ways and detention areas have a variety of ownership methods. Typically and more ideally, they're in separate tracts or easements that are maintained either by the city, which is the case for Markey Regional or Somerset Park, or they may be maintained by a property or homeowners association, which is the case with Hargis Lake, Traditions, and Autumn Ridge. So a lot of the newer subdivisions have that method of maintenance. Or in some cases, they are maintained by an owner or developer. So that's typically more common in commercial setups as well as mobile home parks. What's not very common is when a drainage way has easements on private property, which is the situation with the West Belton Drainage Way, which makes it particularly challenging. So this is currently the West Belton Drainage Way, or at least this is what it was about a month ago. These photos are from August. Which shows the natural growth of the vegetation on the slopes. And This is just for this growing season, so generally there's been minimal growth in those areas, and what has grown is generally natural. Unlike in the past, there were a lot of concerns with the volunteer trees that eventually grew up in that area, and there will be some photos of some situations in some other cities in the metro here in a minute. But currently, that's not the situation, but that was the situation after about 10 years of not having this area maintained. So the proposed policy would be to allow that natural vegetation growth to continue along the slopes of both drainage ways as well as detention areas. However, it should be noted, and these photos are all from Indian Creek in Olathe, which is a city-maintained drainage way. The issue is that over time, volunteer trees and other potential invasive plantings may spread through there, so there are going to need to be routine clearing or thinning every few years to support the drainage of that area. So you can see in this photo, I don't know the last time that Olathe cleaned this out, but there are volunteer trees that have started to pop up in there, and if those aren't maintained or removed in a timely manner, they could potentially obstruct the drainage through those areas. Another thing that in our proposed policy, this gets more into new developments, is that we need to do a better job of encouraging and requiring native planting and grasses on and along slopes that would improve bank stabilization and long-term maintenance. So here are some examples from Prairie Village, where they recently, at the Meadowbrook Park redevelopment, they planted native grasses along the natural drainage way there. As long as that's maintained, you can keep that free and clear of high growth. The grasses are naturally grow to a certain height and they won't grow beyond that. And then this is an example in Overland Park of a newer subdivision that's more of a detention area that just has native grasses in that. And we have a similar example in Cherry Hill right now that's similar to that, where they have natural vegetation in there. And then looking long-term in terms of as we grow, trails can serve as a desirable amenity and a buffer along drainage ways. A lot of cities utilize their drainage ways for trail connections. We've already started that with the Oil Creek Trail and hope to continue that through Cleveland Lake and some other future developments down south. But Raymore has done a good job of that along Lucy Webb Road with some of their subdivisions, and then also several neighborhoods in Olathe. So there's some example photos there of how we can better utilize that as well to create that buffer. But that is the policy that we're proposing. So what we are proposing tonight is to allow the West Belton Drainage Way to continue to grow naturally as it currently is, but it's something that we will have to monitor.
When you go back to the first picture there in West Belton, I know in some of those areas they put those big rocks, and that's part of the problem. And I'm not saying all the areas, but in a couple of the areas they got those big rocks. So getting in there and trying to weed eat, I understand that is a difficult thing. And maybe it's to where we get rid of the rocks and make it the natural type grass or something where you could maintain it better over a long term. But that's all I was thinking.
Just to clarify, when you say that, every couple years maintenance, who would be responsible for that, for thinning out the volunteer trees? You guys.
That's
Got that
the
cool
challenge.
remote mower.
Yeah.
It can take down anything, right?
It can't take down anything, but it would be something that we'd have to go to prevent damage to the actual bottom of the channel. We'd have to go through there and remove trees and stay on top of it.
I've got pictures from 21 before it was cleared out, and it was a jungle. So I appreciate all the work you have put into solving this issue, and I think this is a good proposal.
Go ahead.
How many privately owned drainage ways do we have?
West Belton's the only one that I'm aware of. Greg, I don't know if you can think of any others. There's a lot of drainage easements in various properties, but in terms of a situation like this is pretty uncommon.
So this is a large drainage easement. There are drainage easements throughout the city, and maintaining them and keeping them clean is an important thing. So some are just swales that are less than a foot deep to a foot deep. Those still have to be kept clean too. Now those are much easier because those are easily mowed. A lot of people have grass in them, but they do occur throughout the city.
So this would only be for West Belton, or would this apply to other somewhat larger ones if we have those?
I don't think there's another large one like this that is privately maintained.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the question is smaller ones, like if you go down Y Highway south of Maine, there's some pretty steep slopes. They're not nearly as big as this, but I've noticed they fill up with weeds and stuff because as opposed to mowing it every 2 weeks like the homeowner normally does, he might say, I'll mow it only once or twice a year. And I assume he's responsible all the way out to the roadway. And yet they're very steep.
So for roadside ditches, yes, those are all the property owner's responsibility to keep them mowed.
Right. So those are not drainage ways, those are ditches.
Correct.
Okay. But I still was a little confused because you're saying that in West Belton, the people who abut those drainage ways actually own them and they've given them an easement to the city? Is that
That's correct. All the property is privately owned, and we just have an easement on it to convey the stormwater. They can't block the drainage, and they are responsible per that easement to maintain it.
Okay. Did they have a say in, I mean, I know this is 15 years ago or so, did they have a say in that, or I guess it was...
When they signed over the easement, all that language was in the easement documentation that they did sign and was recorded with the county.
Okay, and I think that's the letter that the codes enforcement looked at, which said that they would never have to, or at the time, they wouldn't have to maintain the ditches. And then all of a sudden, they started getting code violations about the ditch mowing. So I appreciate, again, your following up on this.
That's actually the reverse.
Did we
It's
not?
actually,
Oh, go
that's
ahead.
actually the reverse. The easement said that they had to maintain the ditch that
Yeah,
they signed.
The
Just want to make
language,
sure that's clear.
yeah, the easement language from 2009, 2010, whenever they were recorded, specifically did state that they had to maintain it. But then there were letters that were sent out by city staff at the time that said that based on the design of it, it would just to leave it natural, and it would require minimal maintenance. So it was interpreted at that time that they wouldn't have to do anything to it. At least that's how I think the residents interpreted the letter when it said minimal
Yeah, I know that's how
maintenance.
they interpreted it. So there's official easement, and then there was a letter of interpretation, and everything went smoothly until somebody thought snakes were coming out of there, and then there were code violations, so.
Just to clarify, and not to get into the whole saga this has been, it was a resident who came to the council and said, hey, the city needs to maintain this. And then the city cleaned it out once at the direction of the former city manager and then said, no, actually, this is yours to maintain. So this is kind of another situation where a resident said, hey, I think this is a problem, and the city tried to solve it, but then we've doubled back down on that effort, and I think this is the final and actual solution, whereas in the interim, we were looking at what was done previously and wasn't a good fit. So if you have time later, I'll tell you all about it.
Well, but I would think the residents right now would go back to that 2010 letter that Matt just mentioned and say, it says here, we don't have to do other than minimal maintenance. And so something has to be written down this time too. I mean, other than just the minutes of this meeting. Maybe another letter of interpretation, I don't know, and then 10 years later, somebody else can debate whether or not it's overgrown.
Well, and we still may end up with the same issue in 10 years.
Yeah.
They're going to be, right now, we're basically starting over in 2010, and that's why it would be better if we made sure that it was maintained more frequently than waiting 10 years when it became a jungle, because aesthetically, some people don't like the way that this is maintained, but a majority of the property owners, it's working for them for the safety purposes.
And like Matt said, this isn't codified. This is just their policy
Sure.
interpretation.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. I think, like I mentioned, when this first came up a couple months ago, when we were directed to go and look for this type of a solution, I think this is a situation where there's no perfect solution, right? I mean, there are two opposing views to this, and both have a lot of legitimacy to them. The more vegetation there, the more likelihood that there is for rodents and snakes to exist. But if we require the property owners to maintain it, then there's a safety issue and legitimate concerns there. So I mean, there really is no perfect solution here, unless we had more money than we know what to do with to go and just maintain it ourselves. But so I think this is probably the best compromise solution that we can come up with, and I think that's why you've seen it go back and forth a couple times over the last 15 years, because there's no perfect solution.
Go ahead.
So is this different than the drainage that we recently put in over in Ward 2, over the flooding issues? Do they still have to maintain theirs? And then I'm thinking, I think there's another one similar to this over, like behind Lacey, the house is butt up against it. I just remember walking back and forth home to school from Lake Yoakum, and there's a little bridge, and I mean, smaller than this, but still pretty steep. Will it not? Do those both?
Well, the difference is the one that's in like Lacey Estates, that is a creek, and that's more of a natural creek, and so it has easier slopes to it, so it should be easier to maintain. Now, there's sometimes the creek will meander, causing places to get a little steeper and places like that, and so those are still in people's backyards that they have to maintain, and it's actually natural. So when they bought their house, they knew what they're buying. They saw it. This was constructed later, so it's a little bit different.
Okay. And the one in Ward 2?
Oh,
is
Hargis?
That, yeah. Oh, yes, Hargis. Thank you.
So Hargis Lake, that is actually the difference there. That's the property owner's responsible to maintain it, but the difference there is instead of building with slopes on the side, it's built straight up and down. So your yard goes basically at the same elevation it was, right up to the edge. So it's just like your yard.
Okay.
Anybody else? Sounds good. Item C, Traditions Daycare.
Yep, we do have a special use permit and a final plat that will come before council on October 11th for the Traditions Daycare project, which is approximately 8,200 square foot commercial daycare center that would be located at the southeast corner of South Mullen Road and Sycamore Drive in the Traditions neighborhood. That project also includes an outdoor playground and parking lot to serve the daycare facility. We did have a public hearing last week at the Planning Commission, and based on the feedback we did receive, staff is working with the developer on adding some additional landscaping on the south side of that property for additional buffering adjacent to the single-family homes to the south. And that revised landscape plan will be included for consideration with the special use permit.
What about fencing?
We do not require fencing as a buffer. There's other options. Most of the properties, except for the one property owner that did speak with concerns about it, most of the other properties all have fencing out there. So that's the one property that doesn't have fencing.
Go ahead.
I know prior we had people concerned about parking. Will parking possibly be an issue and increase traffic on that road? Have we done any kind of traffic study for that, just to make sure that this isn't going to create an emergency situation?
So the site is required, based on the square footage, 14 parking spaces, and they provided 26. In terms of a traffic study wasn't required based on the estimated number of trips for that type of land use. Generally speaking, though, given where the daycare facility is, we would anticipate that a number of the attendees at that facility would come from within the neighborhood or the surrounding neighborhood, and most of the traffic would be exiting the neighborhood and going north on Mullen towards 58 and not south. So turn movement-wise, there shouldn't be any significant issues getting in and out of that location.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Just a quickie. When Brett mentioned fencing, I was thinking more of fencing to keep the youngins off of 4-lane road.
Okay.
Is there any fencing around?
Yes, we do require fencing for the outdoor playground.
Okay.
It's a minimum of 3.5 feet, and it would be a black wrought iron style aluminum picket fencing. and that would be around the entire perimeter of the playground. There will also be additional retaining walls and landscaping between that fence and Mullen Road for some additional buffering as well.
Okay.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I just know that, that all of the citizens that are living around that were concerned about the need for greater, other than a few trees, for buffering. So I hope that that's, when that comes to the city council, that they've really considered that.
All right, anybody else? All right, item D, commercial street vacation.
The city of Belton now owns a majority of the properties along both sides of Commercial Street between Cherry and North Avenue. And we are currently working on obtaining a legal exhibit and description to begin the street vacation process for that section. That process would help facilitate the redevelopment of adjacent properties to that right-of-way, as well as require the relocation of above-ground utilities to a more appropriate location. Staff is working with MoDOT on identifying the right-of-way boundaries between what's city and MoDOT right-of-way. And once those boundaries have been determined, we will file the vacation request and follow the public notice and hearing processes for that.
Any questions? Hearing none, homeless committee.
Yeah, we did hold the
Homelessness committee. I'm sorry.
homelessness committee. Yes, we did host the forum last month, and it was very well attended. There were 23 people by my count, not including myself and Matt there, and that included a few of you, and so we appreciated that. Received a lot of feedback. We essentially, where we left that was that we started to aggregate some information, so that way information sharing can take place hopefully at a higher level than it is now. And then with the potential creation of a committee to maybe recommend policy down the line, or at least facilitate, consistent communication at the very least is our hope for this. And so we would like to see if we can be effective with this. And so we have received 7 applications for this. We're not asking for that, and this is a work session item. I think that we did set an initial deadline of, I believe, the September 16th, but we could definitely extend that if we needed to. I think that it'd be worthwhile for us to go ahead and push forward this committee. I'd love to hear your feedback on whether we want to push that onto the October 10th agenda or not.
I'm ready to push. I haven't been too pushy late.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yes. Yes.
Sure, yes.
All right, then we'll have something for your consideration on October 10th.
All right, that's it. I entertain a motion to enter into executive session, discuss matters pertaining to legal actions according to Missouri State Statute 610.021.1 and the leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.2, and that the record be closed and the meeting adjourned from there.
Present.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Richardson?
Aye.
Howell?
Yes?
Pryan?
All right.
Kraft?
Aye.
Goff?
Aye.
White?
Aye.
Lawson? Aye. Mayor Larkey?
Yes, we stand adjourned. Take a couple minutes and